Welcome back to the channel. All right, welcome to the first video for the top 10s of June 2024. We do this every June, every December, on top of the monthly tier list and all those things. It is a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing this. Now, I'm going to cut very soon to my explanation basically on the whole scoring system for the monthly tier list that we then use to do this. If you've already heard it, or if maybe you're just not interested, which is totally fine, go to the timestamp in the description. You can go straight to the rankings. The one thing I will say though is you're going to hear me use the terms for the categories and those sorts of things that we do for the rankings. You're going to hear that throughout these videos. It might be helpful to give that a quick watch once, and it might be interesting to hear how we evaluate champions. All right, let's jump into this very quickly. And remember, if you've already seen how this format works, go ahead and just jump to the timestamp that I've listed in the description. You can get right to the rankings. Now, this is how we've broken down every single champion, rated them. This is when I talk about the thoroughness, the hours, the debating, going back and forth. It is a lot of fun, but this is how we do it. And then this is how they're all scored. And every month that is presented in the general tier list. We've been doing this for, I think, 4 years now. So let's go over this, and this is how they're going to be listed now. There are four categories. They're not equally weighted, but there are four general categories. There's ease of use, battlegrounds, war, and general. And then general is an added up score of those other four categories. And we'll talk about them when we get to them. Ease of use, this is worth about 3 points. This is the epitome of it, is Sunspot. I know often we think of like our parry heavy champions, like an Archangel being the easiest to use. And I'm not saying they're not, but we are including champions like Sunspot, phenomenal champion, not a knock on him. And in fact, I know many players like the spreadsheet because they can configure it for ease of use, even though I always present it every month without ease of use. For the sake of these rankings here in June, we will be including ease of use. Moving on to Battlegrounds, this is worth 10 points. And you see my Battlegrounds rankings every single month. We've been doing that since before Battlegrounds even came out. We're now adding even the scores so you can see them. Photon is a 10 out of 10 in the dual threat category. She's a very good defender, a menacing defender. There are some very good counters for her though. If you pull Photon, someone pulls a Mantis, you throw her on attack, and there's a lot of meta defenders that she is very good for. So she's the perfect example of a 10 out of 10 in Battlegrounds. Moving on to War. War is in an interesting place, and I won't take too much time for this, for that discussion in this. But in War, the relevance really there was outside of sagas, outside of metas and these sorts of things, attacker tactic, defender tactics. Who are the champions? Who are the few champions that when you're in tier 1, you're 2, you're really pushing, I don't know, tier 3. Who are the champions that are almost always someone you're looking to assign? Yes, there's going to be times in metas and defenders, things like that, can X them out. But some champions just flat are more usable than others in War, and Tiger is definitely the 10 out of 10, at least for now, in War. That's an example of that. Now moving on to General, you have a total score of 15. This is the biggest because I know not everyone does War, I know not everyone does Battlegrounds, but everyone plays the game. And this is broken down into long form. You can get up to 3 points for this. This is the most heavily weighted on Necropolis. We've had like all the various of Legends content, and of course Grandmaster's Gauntlet, and then now there's the EOP and things like that. All of them are going to be presenting different challenges, defenders, node sets, trap nodes, and those sorts of things. And then of course, like in EOP, there's even our hashtag objectives and things like that. But there are champions that we can say, especially looking at Necropolis, just appear to be better in long form than others. You think of your Kate Bishop, Wong, Aegon, Shuri, those sorts of things. Champions have all been rated across there for their ability to ramp up and then maintain that ramp. You think of like Dani Moonstar, she can do massive damage after a ramp, but it starts all over. Very rarely you're going to be using her for your long form, maybe an EOP sort of thing. Probably not in the Necropolis or the next version of Necropolis when it comes out. Moving on to Flow. Spider-Ham is the epitome of this. In fact, it's when I came up with the term flows, when I first covered him years ago when he came into the game. I'm going to read it to you. How well do a champion's abilities and specials fit together? How easily does a node or a defender or an AI throw off the attacker? How relevant is that in today's game? Example is Spider-Ham is a 5 out of 5. I literally came up with this term and this definition because it is different than ease of use with Spider-Ham. You need a power sting, he's got it. He can apply them without even needing power. You need a taunt, he's got one for you. You need an evade, it's available. All of the specials do something, they help him out. You land the heavy to keep his spider nonsense high. You gotta play him well. I don't have him as a 3 out of 3 ease of play. He's high though. But it's his flow, in my opinion, his flow and his budget and his meta that make him so incredibly powerful. Moving on to budget. This is also worth 5 points. How many relevant abilities and immunities are in the champion's kit? Utility brought to a fight, and also damage is part of this. So yes, you may not have the most utility, but if you got enough damage, you're gonna get at least a decent score of this. Hercules, right? You want him to crit? He can crit. You want big crits? He can do that too. You want to go unblockable? He can do that. Yeah, you got to get close to death, but still, he can do it. He can just do so many things. He has relevant resistances. He's a phenomenal champion. His synergies are great. 5 out of 5 budget. Everything that could be packed into one single champion and still be in this game is there. 5 out of 5 budget. There are a few other 5 out of 5s, but Herc is my favorite example of it. Meta, this is the one that we really need to stay on top of. Really, when we're talking often, if you see me promote or demote a champion, or when I come out a little bit like hesitant or conservative on them when they're new, it's their meta score that's quote unquote holding them back or moving them up, because I'm just not sure how they're going to be used. And then as time shifts on, some champions become better in the meta and some become worse. Like CGR's meta score has actually gone up as late. We've talked about that a lot on this channel. And if you think about Hulkling, I actually talked about on stream today, he came out as a penny counter. But he was so good and across so many ways, and some of it's flow and some of it's budget too, that he's not just for your tech champions. Like if you think about future Ant-Man, he happens to have a Pierce. So a lot of your tech champions who are problematic, Iron Man Infinity War is coming back, well, Hulkling can go unblockable. But he's also then good outside of that. He's got his resistances, or I'm sorry, he's got his immunities and those sorts of things. But Onslaught comes out, very problematic defender, no like seemingly hard counters outside of Havoc necessarily, but people were using Hulkling for Onslaught. He's just so meta relevant. This can shift. This is the one that we're always keeping our eye on and why champions get promoted and demoted. Hopefully you have a really good understanding of how the tier list works, the scoring and all of that. All right, let's jump into it. There's going to be 10 champions we're going to talk about for this, because it's going to be a top 10, but there were 11 champions that have come out so far in 2024. New champions. The number 11 is Silver Sable, and she's number 11 by a good margin. Like, it is significant how much lower her rating is than the rest of the champions. It feels like they tried to do something. I just don't think it worked out. I don't think it's very practical for our game, and I don't think summoners are going to play her very much outside of summoners who just desperately want to play Silver Sable. They're fans of the character. They just find her loop enjoyable. It is. I just find it not very practical for today's game. Maybe time will prove me wrong. The reason we're on her, though, is that there are also 4 champions that were buffed this year. And I don't mean buffed by the rebalance program. That's a rebalance. We're not going to consider that for this list here. But I do want to call them out because they're all very, very good. And every single one of them would have made this top 10. First one's Mr. Sinister. Second one is Red Guardian, who would have honestly been tied for second on this list. Nightcrawler coming in, and then Luke Cage, who is very, very good and also would have been tied for second. He's excellent. In fact, I will link Jaeger's video on Luke Cage. I've had some channel members ask why I'm so high on Luke Cage. I will link Jaeger's video on Luke Cage so you can go and hopefully probably make yourself feel better after pulling Luke Cage from the Titan Crystal. We have a tie for the number 10 and 9 spot. Let's move on to them. Coming in at a tie for the 9th spot, so 9 and 10, we've got the Destroyer. Now, I came out very positive on Destroyer in his new champion video, and then I did actually pull him, got outrageously lucky. I pulled him, took him to rank 2, and he wasn't awakened. And one of the things I had talked about in the new champion video was I thought he was going to be very strong in war. I had concerns in Battleground, but I thought a lot of that would be alleviated by getting him awakened. Well, it was playing out exactly as I thought, but then I had a very fortunate miss, and I call it a miss because I didn't just get like the 1 or 2 champions I wanted from the Titan Crystal, but it was fortunate because I got Destroyer and I awakened it. Apparently it's an it, and he's been phenomenal. I don't know when you will see this video versus my Destroyer video, but hopefully you will see my Destroyer video very, very soon if you haven't already seen it. It has been surpassing my expectations from when I did the new champion video. There are a good amount of immunities here. There is obviously the passive or the massive, and I believe it is also passive power gain. You do want to still get to your SP3, and the signature ability helps out tremendously in that. I will show that in the video. But also, and here's what's been really interesting, and TJ of SSX was the first one to really make me see it, and Jaeger's been doing it a lot now too. is in some fights, you don't need to get all the way to your SP3. It shortens his loop dramatically. I'm still not finding him to be a phenomenal Battlegrounds champion. I don't think he's quite fast enough, but he's also in some metas already been a very potent defender. And also, and I'll show this in that video, the Destroyer video, but I'll also talk about it when I do the Juggernaut relic. You can configure that relic to help out Destroyer for one of the few things it's a little bit weak on. I really like this champion, and I think it's either going to hold its current value or possibly go up in value when we do this again in December. All right, tied with Destroyer at the 9th spot is Spider-Punk. Now, Spider-Punk is a victim of the hype, right? So many of us, I think, did enjoy the character from the comics, but then saw the Into the Spider-Verse and just absolutely loved this character, and me being one of them. And it's a great character. He is a great character in MCoC, but also going up against all of these science nuke champions. They're just dominating things. Hulk, Titania, Silk, Red Guardian, right? And I think there was absolutely almost no way for Spider-Punk to hit that bar. And they've come in just under it if you're looking for nuke. But here's what I want to tell you. This champion is really, really good, and Campo has put out a phenomenal video showing there is some long form value there as well too. And when we did the stream testing, and then I also pulled Spider-Punk on the Vega Prime account, which hopefully you're familiar with. It's my other account that I started, a free to play account, and we got Spider-Punk as 4-star, took him up. I was very, very impressed. I never did get good at his mini game, but even without that, he was taking tough fights for me. He has this unintuitive power control with, and I can't think of what the name of what it's called, but you get the opponent to throw a single special, and then they get this passive. It's reminiscent of Mr. Fantastic. It's not exactly the same. And then they're more likely to continue throwing it, and when they do, they get the rupture on, and his rupture damage really gets going. It is reminiscent in that sense of Spider-Man 2099, where when they came out, we're like, oh, this isn't very good. I remember I was low on Miguel when he came into the game, and then over time I was like, oh, wait, there is something here. I don't know if Spider-Punk's ever going to reach the highs that Spider-Man 29 did, especially in war, but this is a potent champion. This is not someone to be upset if you pull him. At least I won't be upset if I pull him. It's just he's in a very, very competitive class, but he is very well made. He has a very fun loop, and the Guitar Hero thing on the SP2, it is a fun addition to the game. I just am not very good at it, but I think if you play it enough, I know a lot of summoners have become effective with it. Oh, he also has a taunt, and he can go slightly unstoppable once you get enough of his crowd noise going. And then additionally, in Battlegrounds, he starts with, I think it's like half of his crowd. So his ramp it helps him out if you want to use him in Battlegrounds. I think this is someone, you know, if you're pushing for those upper echelons of Celestial, he might not be the champion for you, but if that's not the tier you're looking to play for, I think you're gonna have a lot of success with him in Battlegrounds as well. I think he's very much gonna hold his place in the tier list as we go through into December. Coming in at number 8, all by herself, is Ironheart, and I actually want to read these because there's quite a bit of them. While Ironheart has her arm up effect, she's immune to reverse controls, which I know I hate, Incinerate, Cold Snap, and Frostbite. Additionally, her personal debuffs are unaffected by ability action modification against mutants. Now, that doesn't make her like a perfect Domino counter. So many people who fought Domino know. If something can fail, Domino will fail it, and you're going to take the crit damage. But she's not bad for it. She can do it, and all of those immunities right there give her value, right? Like when we talk about like the budget score, her budget score is pretty high, and then it goes up even higher with her ability to choose whether she's gonna do rupture or incinerate damage. On top of that, she has tracking as well. Whenever you can like turn off one of those big things, right? Like unstoppable, evade, or miss, that also is going to increase it. And then she does have enough damage. This is not a damage monster in my experience, but it is enough damage. This is not Cap Sam Wilson, that she can take advantage of all of those immunities, and then the utility with the different damage sources and the tracking. This is a very, in my opinion, a very well-made champion. She feels like an homage to a lot of other tech champions put together, and I guess Science too with Scorpion, but put together very, very well. That if you pull her, you're gonna have a lot of fun with her, and I do think she's built well for today's game. I don't expect her to be going up in the ratings. Like when we get to December of this year, I don't think she's going to have been promoted and higher up in this list or in my monthly tier list, but I also don't expect her to fall for a very, very long time. I think this is a champion that's holding very, very well going to kind of find herself in the meta as always a very solid option for a variety of fights, and champion you can rank up. And you heard all of those immunities and then all of her utility with enough damage is reminiscent to me of actually what you've heard me describe Havoc for. So champion that's just going to stick around and keep kicking for a very long time. Coming in at number 7 is White Tiger, and she is kind of in her own tier. And I look at the scoring, there's enough of a scoring difference between her and Ironheart below her, and then what's going to be a big tie for number 3 above her. A lot of that's due to her being a bit of a mystery. Now, I want to be clear. I do not think that she's going down in these rankings at all. She's incredibly unique in the Mystic class, which is a very powerful class, and it's honestly my favorite to play in the game. I'm going to kind of read to you a little bit of what she can do. Now, we've seen this in videos, but there's just so much in there, and I don't have as much experience with her. I want to make sure I get this right. Just a couple of things that make her incredibly unique is her immunity to nullify, which is unusual in the Mystic class. And then the way she can like purify debuffs based on the amount of buffs the other champion has. We've seen this a lot with like its gore. And then she is a really good Hulkling counter. So there's the power steal, I believe it is what she technically has. She can do a significant amount of damage. And then I don't think we're seeing the defender capabilities, which are there because it's in her SIG. I think as people get her higher SIG'd up, as people start ranking their 6 stars, you're going to see her in Battlegrounds more. And then I think we're going to see her kind of rise when the 7-star becomes readily available. People get her ranked up and as 6 stones become available. I think she's unique enough and her damage is good enough that we will see her at a minimum hold in value and possibly go up in the Mystic class as time goes on. We've got a 4-way tie for 3rd, and they're all excellent champions. I think phenomenal additions to the game, and they do represent a tier above, right, over White Tiger. And the first one we're talking about is Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Now, I've covered her a lot, and you know I think she's a very good champion. There was that quote, right, about she like nullifies all defensive threats that skill champions have ever had. I'm over-exaggerating slightly, but not that much. And it's actually true, right? With all of her passives, her non-contacts, and those sorts of things, all the things that skill champions do that are terrifying or defensively problematic, right? In damage back mechanics, or in purifying your stuns, your debuffs, or your damage sources, she just gets around. Her play loop is not easy. It's well made, and her flow is good, but she's not easy to play. Even I had a few fights against Bullseye despite being able to test her in CCP, and I messed them up, and I showed that to you in her new champion video. I think as we get used to her though, she'll start dominating Bullseyes and those sorts of things, but she has no immunities and she has no ways to handle evade, unstoppable, or anything like that. So I think she's a really balanced champion despite turning off all of those threats to the skill class. She's someone that summoners are going to want. I don't think you need to have her now though. I think you're often going to be okay against Bullseye with some of those soft counters. We've talked about that at length in this channel. But as time goes on, I think you're going to want her. When you pull her, you're going to be happy. You're going to rank her up, get used to her play style, and then you're going to be really happy because she's going to handle a lot, not just Bullseye, but a lot of these skill mechanics for you when you don't need an unstoppable counter, when you don't need an evade counter, and when you do not need immunities. All right, speak of the devil, right? Now, we all know what a problematic defender this guy is, and that's what he was designed to do. I do and don't like fighting him. I hate and don't hate fighting him. It does, the designer did a really nice job. Now, offensively though, I put out the video a while ago telling you he's actually really good offensively. And that video took its time to get going. And I know, because I put it out at a point where people were so just angry still about him as a defender. And some of the comments on there were definitely voiced that. But time has gone on and people are seeing how strong he is as an attacker. I will say, his damage is not eye-popping. I like huge bursts, okay? And he doesn't do that. But the bleeds add up. If you go far enough to your, close enough to your SB3 and you throw that SB2 after it's the killer instinct, right? And there is some asks, because he is a very tough defender. So there are asks of you skill-wise when you're playing him offensively. He's got the guaranteed critical hits. He cannot miss. And then I think it's the true strike, or he counters evade off of his SP1, and he can keep that up pretty well and still have meaningful damage. He's a very good attacker. People are seeing how good he was in incursions and things like that. A lot's due to his bleeds, but that's fine. In fact, I know, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say their name, so I will not, but a player with a massive roster who is in pretty good Celestial and constantly in there, consistently there, has told me that they use Bullseye on attack as much as they place Bullseye on defense, and Bullseye at their rank 3 does a phenomenal job for him. I do not think Bullseye is going to be going up in value because he doesn't have that eye-popping damage. It's good. It's very good. And you can get things done with him. I've shown that in the video. But his defensive prowess and his very capable offensive use with all that utility is going to keep him very relevant, in my opinion, in this game for a very long time. All right, let's move on to the other champion tied for number 3. Our next champion tied for 3rd is Deathless King Groot. Now, this is a very good champion. I'm very excited that I awakened him in the recent Spring of Sorrow fight, right? It was worth it to go ahead and use him against that onslaught. Now, if you've seen that or you've done that fight, hopefully you know it well enough to know that King Groot was basically missing the vast majority of his damage. You could get the armor breaks up off of his SP1, but you couldn't do the Incinerate because it caused Onslaught to go wild, right? You don't want to Incinerate Onslaught. It was a bad example of King Groot's damage. I stream tested him. He starts hitting like a truck. Now, they talked about him saying that he's going to be like a ramp-up champion, and that is true because you can get the armor ups up, and the more you get up, the more damage you're doing. But the fact of the matter was, I found the damage to be very respectable in your lower term fights. He's not going to be a Battlegrounds nuke, but I do think he's a champion where if you wanted to use him and you had him at a high enough rank, you could use him in Battlegrounds. He could even be a bit of a defensive stall for you, as long as they can't nullify his buffs and things like that. His health pool is relatively large. He also has the immunity to bleed. This was a very good champion. They did a nice job of updating the kit of regular King Groot, who was still very good, but as the classes started to evolve, I do think was falling off. He could heal and heal and heal, but I think most summoners would gladly take some of that excessive healing, turn it into damage like they did with Deathless King Groot, and you end up with this phenomenal package of like a still tanky champion who can still heal, but has a lot of immunities and versatility with enough damage now to get you through. I really like this champion. I don't see them falling down in the rankings. I don't see him going up in the rankings, but he's phenomenal. Number 3, tied for 3rd, best champion in 2024 as we head into the second half. Our final champion tied at number 3 is Dust, and I really like this champion. We stream tested her, or no, I did the new champion video on her, and I came away very impressed. Now, in that video, I showed her running the recoil tree, and I do think if you want those apexes, you want the eye-popping stuff, I think you run her with that, but I don't think you have to. I thought she'd be very valuable in war, and I know Lord Gara, my friend, SSX friend, thought that she'd be very valuable in war too. Fortunately, he pulled her, has been doing phenomenal stuff with her. Now, it's hard because you just start to discount it a little bit. Like Grass did a nice video on Dust too. You start to discount it because you're like, well, they're running power backs. Grass isn't running recoil though. And you start to pull out all that away, and you still have a very powerful champion who has 3 immunities, which is very rare in the mutant class. And then also, and this is part of what I really like about her, is she really charges up against champions who are purifying her debuffs, right? Her sand, which fits with the class mechanics. But, and this is what I like, you know, I always like champions that like power up when someone's immune to their stuff or they're immune, or right? So it's kind of like a double up. It almost feels exponential as far as their power level, right? Because you're like, where you want to use them, they're getting even better. Well, Dust does this in a very clever way in that she can like purify her own stuff. And so there's this almost this mini game and this strategy that you go through with your mediums and your lights with her, and like putting on the debuffs and then taking them back off. So yes, you're wanting to use her in those matchups where people or champions are purifying her damage source or her debuff. You don't have to use her there. You can use her outside of that, and she is still incredibly effective. I really like her. She has a great loop, a great fun play style. I do not see her moving down anytime soon, not with that damage and not with those immunities. All right, let's move on to number 2, all by himself. Now, this guy is a bit of a mystery, right? And I know some of you, you're going to be like, no, his damage is too bad, right? No, absolutely not. And I'm here to tell you, look, Pepe's got a great video. Bitter Steel has a great video showing this guy has more than enough damage, and it's a 6-star, rank 5 ascended. Even I've done really good fights with Prowler. He has so much utility baked into one kit. And I will say, and I think this is the issue, is, you know, you do have a lot that you want to line up. You want to line up that Incinerate off this heavy, and then you want to get the opponent to throw their power when they have a certain amount of bars of power, so they go down to 0 bars of power. And then you're going to get all your, I think they're the passive furies and all of those sorts of things. But once you start playing him, you start to really feel that the loop's actually not that complex. It's not that complicated. It's more just about how do you tailor that for the defender or the node that you're fighting. I think this guy is here to stay. I think as people pull him as a 7-star, they're going to be more willing to rank him up. Like, this is kind of the thing with a lot of these champions, right? Is they're more accessible as 6 stars for obvious reasons, but people aren't as wanting to rank them up because we're moving on to the 7 stars. The people who would be considering purchasing those early access deals are like, I really want 7 stars. So you're just not seeing too many people rank them up, take them to the most powerful power level. He's very, very good. Just based alone on the videos of Bitter Steel and Pepe, and then my own experience with him, I can say confidently he is very, very good. And he goes outside of his class wheel. He is not just like a domino counter, although he is a pretty good domino counter. You're gonna find him doing a lot more than just beating up on mutants. I do not think he's moving down. In fact, I really feel that over the next like year, 12 months or so, as people get their hands on the 7-star or rank up resources are plentiful enough that they don't mind spending them on their 6-star rank up resources on him, I think you're gonna see him rise in prominence quite a bit. The number one champion so far in 2024. And I know some of you are like, no, not this guy. Is this a defensive tier list? You know, that does play a role. As you hopefully you've seen the categories, how we do the scoring. We originally had him as a dual threat, but I felt like his defensive prowess is just so incredibly strong right now, right? Like I would consider America Chavez to be kind of a hard counter, Kushala to kind of be a hard counter, but not really. And so he's so powerful defensively. If you've got him awakened, right, he gets that like pseudo immortality and the power gain and that sort of thing. But this is really an offensive tier list. This is a rank up advice tier list. And I think this is definitely a champion. I know this is a champion because I've used him offensively. That you can, you want to put him on defense right now. But as time comes out and there's more answers and people learn how to fight him, you could use him offensively in Battlegrounds. I used him to take out a domino. Okay. He's got, I think it's called the True Sense, that you can get that up and then you just keep it up as long as you don't get hit. He has a nice power gain. He's, to the shock of no one, he's incredibly well made. His flow is very, very good. He's just not designed to be fast. You can take him into long form content and the guy is going to ramp and he's going to crush it. So many people used him for the Incursion Saga, their Zone 25 run. If I still had to do Necropolis, I would probably be taking him into there. I believe he's very, very good for the future Ant-Man fight. You want to go to his SP2 there. His playstyle is pretty simple, right? The SP1 is the ramp, and then if they have a lot of arm reps, you go to the SP2. If they don't have arm reps, you stick to the SP1, maybe to the SP3. Very, very good champion. I'm not going to predict it, but if I had to bet, at the end of this year, by the end of this year of 2024, he is most likely moved to the tier above all, because we're just going to continue to find uses for this guy. I used him in Act 8.4. Other people have too. We got Act 9 coming out, and he's just relevant in the game. He is not overpowered. He is not broken, but he is incredibly well made. And he is incredibly, incredibly relevant for the threats that the game and nodes and defenders are throwing at us. He's fantastic. And he is the one champion that I will confidently tell you we will see again in these rankings in June. Thank you so much for watching. As usual, let me know what you think you got right. Let me know what you think you got wrong. Take care.